Welcome to Director's Circle, a podcast featuring insight from music educators and school leaders discussing their philosophies on the administrative leadership of a comprehensive music program. I'm Doug Conrad, and I'm coming to you live from my one-bedroom apartment in Western Maryland. Let's begin. Hello, and thank you for tuning in to Director's Circle. I'm Doug Conrad, and today we'll be speaking with Dr. Ryan Beeken. Dr. Beeken currently serves as the Director of Choral Studies at Indiana University of Pennsylvania, where he conducts the university chorale, chorus, and chamber singers. As a frequent clinician and festival director, Dr. Beeken is regularly engaged as a conductor, clinician, and educator throughout the United States and internationally. Dr. Beeken, how are you?
I'm wonderful. Thanks for calling and thinking of me.
Yes, very excited to have you here. Thank you for joining us. So to start off, if you could please tell us a little bit about your work background and also your educational background.
Okay. Well, I started teaching public school in Iowa. I taught middle school and high school level for 16 years in 3 different school districts in Iowa. And the most recently from that experience was at Waukee High School, which is a suburb of Des Moines on the west side of Des Moines. And I taught there for 12 years. And then went back to graduate school at Michigan State and ended up out here in Pennsylvania at Indiana University of Pennsylvania, where I've been here for about 7 years now. My undergrad was from Drake University in Des Moines.
Okay, great. So with your time teaching in Waukee High School, one thing that your program was known for at that time was growth in quality, but also growth in numbers. I believe somewhere you went from around 100 students when you started to building that program to over 300, also with additional ensembles being added to your curriculum. So with that expansion in growth in numbers, how did you cultivate that growth initially?
That's a great question. When I started in the first year, we had about 100 students that participated in 2 different ensembles that met during the school day. One was an auditioned SATB choir, and the other was the kids that didn't make the audition group. That's what I inherited. And then there was one group that met before school once a week. It was basically a vocal jazz choir, unaccompanied vocal jazz choir. And over the course of the next 12 years, the community was also growing. It was in Dallas County in Iowa, in West Des Moines. It was the fastest growing school system in the state of Iowa. It was among the top 10 fastest growing communities in the country. And so we had a population growth, which I'm sure contributed to the growth of our program as well. When I left in 2010, I believe it was, we were approaching 300 students in a graduating class. Now I think there's 700 in a graduating class, to kind of give you a sense of the kind of growth that's happening there. But we started to grow in terms of numbers and quality, and partially that was, one, I had to create a vision. What might this program look like? What does the administration expect? What does the community expect? What are the norms in our region for what other programs are doing? What artistically, educationally do I want to bring to the program? And so trying to merge all of those ideas. And for us at Waukee High School, that ended up being wanting to have a comprehensive program where a traditional choral experience was at the core of the program, but where students also had the ability to perform in musicals, in popular music ensembles like show choirs and jazz choirs, produce a madrigal dinner, and then all of the typical kind of festival experiences that happen all over the country, all states, and those kinds of things. And to try to find a way to weave all of that together so that students with the ability and the time and the passion could participate in all of those things. And for us, that ended up meaning that by the time we were done, we had 3 full-time choral directors in grades 9 through 12, about 300 students that sang in choirs, a couple sections of freshman choir, a sophomore choir, 2 11 through 12 SATB choirs, a male ensemble, a female ensemble, 3 jazz choirs, 2 show choirs. That was kind of the general makeup of the program. So I think it was just about deciding what we need to offer, what we want to offer, and how we were going to package it. And then it grew. And we were really lucky to have show choirs and jazz choirs that were competing, which was kind of an expectation in our area. And they competed and did well at competition. And the concert choirs were recognized through 3 or 4 invitations to perform for ACDA conferences at the state, regional, and national level. So it was a pretty sweet gig, that's for sure. It was a great place to work, and I had great people to work with in that environment.
Great. One thing that really stuck out to me in your response was your mentioning of really having a vision established within the community, the school, and even getting a lot of the buy-in from the students. How do you kind of get the kids to latch on and really build a love for that typical repertoire that you would have in a traditional concert choir setting?
Mm-hmm. One, I think it's creating an environment where people want excellence and want to feel like they've accomplished something, in terms of, wow, that was really hard and we did that, or where they feel artistically fulfilled in some level, where they can identify and appreciate high quality repertoire. And this is a hard question to answer. I think, one, I was fortunate that we had outlets in our program for some of those popular styles. So I had less pressure to include it in my traditional choral environment because we had other places in our program where we met those needs. But I think part of it is, as the students got smarter and more skilled, they started to understand that some of the arrangements that are out there of popular music or of musical theater that are sold and marketed to choral directors, that they're really not, they're really caricatures of the original, not really taking the original, owning what it is, and then making it work for your environment, but it becomes a caricature of that original chart that then a choir tries to perform. And the students started to realize that. And I think they also just started to feel pride in what they were, the kind of repertoire that they were able to do and accomplish. And also, I think, just honestly, myself being passionate, thrilled, and excited about the repertoire, that can become contagious, and that I think, as conductors and leaders, if we're vulnerable and genuine and passionate and excited, that the students will feed off of that as well. You know, one thing that I kind of sometimes will talk about is, one of the great things about choral music is we have text, and that text should be able to stand on its own. If you take away the rhythm and the notes and the instrumentation and only look at the text, is that something that's worthy of being studied and being thought about? And sometimes in popular music, which I love me some hip hop music. But if I think about just the text there, that might not be something that, when you strip away the fun beat and everything else, that maybe that text isn't all that meaningful. And so I think if the repertoire that we're feeding people has text that is meaningful, it's easier to get that buy-in. But excitement's contagious. If you're excited, the kids will be excited. Success is contagious. If they're doing well and they're being recognized by others as doing well, then they want to keep doing that.
I would like to pause for a moment to ask for your support in building our listener base. With this show, we rely on the help of our listeners to expand our audience. Please share our episodes with others who may enjoy our content, and be sure to like us on Facebook for updates on all future episodes. Now back to the interview. One thing that I really like to mention was the feeling of success. Now, with success amongst a large music ensemble, that can be felt on an individual or even ensemble level. So this can even tie into some of your work now at IUP. How do you go about cultivating students feeling a level of success in their performance on an individual basis, even if more of the standpoint they're an absolute beginner, or even if something just amongst a group performance? How do you cultivate that feeling of success amongst students in every performance?
Honestly, for me, I think, and what I try to value is, yeah, the performance is important, but what was the process like? Were we successful in the process? Did we feel good through the process? And part of that, I think, is engaging each individual and honoring each individual's in their own contribution as an individual, and how our individuality is woven into a tapestry, that then we all create something together. So where we're honoring our uniqueness, but at the same time recognizing how we have to come together to create a common goal. And to do that, I attempt to be vulnerable and model that myself, in the way that I interact with others, and also opening a space in rehearsal where people can contribute their ideas, their thoughts, and then receive their thoughts, acknowledge their thoughts, receive it, and figure out how to weave that into the interpretive rehearsal process. And also, sometimes we just need time to celebrate. Wow, you guys were awesome yesterday. Let's have cookies. As simple as that sounds. To remember that part of the music experience is a social one, and that's potentially what got students in the door at some point, was some kind of social interaction, and then they stay because they still get that social interaction, but they have the musical opportunities as well.
Yeah, and speaking along the lines of getting student thoughts and input, how have you approached in your rehearsal tactics to get that input, really getting students feeling open to speak out ideas, but then showing those ideas being utilized within the rehearsal?
Yeah, I think, one, we have to be sure that when we engage the ensemble and ask them for their thoughts, that we receive it and acknowledge it and show appreciation for what they've offered, even if it's kind of silly or unrelated or not the best thought. If we're dismissive of someone's ideas when they throw themselves out there, then people aren't going to continue to take that risk and share their thoughts. So if somebody offers something up, I try to repeat it back to them, what they've said, and in some way house that in positivity, and wow, that's cool, and then continue bringing other people in. And then, if someone has an idea, like let's say we're talking about a Sarah Teasdale poem, and in the poetry somebody says, well, I feel like really the poet here is talking about this sense of loneliness that she has, or whatever it is, and then from there saying, wow, that's really cool. So if this is about loneliness, how might that inform our volume right here? Or what kind of sound do you imagine? If you had to describe the way the ensemble sounds to somebody who can't hear it, how would you describe it? And then that then becomes the way that they've created and participated in the interpretive elements for how we deliver that music. So, and I think they think that that's really cool. And versus me being the dictator saying, do it like this, it's how might we explore this together, and eventually we create something collaboratively, versus me just bossing everybody around all the time.
Great. And part of that input too in getting students to really speak out really has to depend a lot on a close relationship amongst the teacher and the student. So I remember once reading an article that you had written for NAFME. You really contribute conductor-student relationships as a foundation for leadership within a music program. So with that said, whether at IUP or your experience in public schools, how have you approached with connecting with your students on a personal level in and outside of rehearsal?
Yeah, I think it's very important. It is critical and fundamental that that relationship between the teacher and the conductor and the students is a healthy one. Um, it's not. I'm not going to pretend that I've always been successful and perfect at that. I've screwed up a lot, but I think the what I try to do is one in the beginning of the year. I usually organize some type of a retreat that's outside of our normal rehearsal schedule or class schedule, maybe in some place that's neutral, not in on school grounds, where we get together, play games, get to know each other. They see me being a normal human, not Mr. Conductor teacher, and play games, get to know each other. Just talk about what the year is going to be about, what things we have on the schedule for the year, and then try to figure out a way to cultivate their creation of goals. How do you want this to look? What do you value? Why are you here? What's going to keep you here? What do you expect from me? What do you expect from each other? And kind of laying all of that out versus me giving them a syllabus saying, here are the rules and the expectations and do it. Kind of bringing them into that and letting them generate those thoughts, I think is really powerful. Think little things that I do now or did when I taught high school is be visible, go to the football game. And I'm not a very sporty guy. I don't even understand all the rules sometimes in the things, but being there and being seen and showing support. Or on a small level, you can't always be everywhere. But I can remember that Billy had a football game, and I can write Billy a note saying, hey, I heard you guys won your game last night. Awesome. So good that you're happy to hear that your hard work's paying off, and then sign my name on it and give it to Billy later. Or here at IUP, I write notes to students after they sing in a recital or in a concert, if they have a solo or if they've done something, in a visible way. I attempt to go out of my way to acknowledge what they've done. And often that's with a note, or maybe an email, or at the least a conversation of some kind. And I think all that goes a long ways towards building trust, building rapport, building a sense of that I care and that we care about each other. And when that is present, people then they try harder. They care more. They want to, for lack of a better way to describe it, they want to please me. I want to please them because they care about the way we feel about each other. And that can be a very powerful and positive tool in helping everybody achieve success.
Great. So, speaking amongst your students, can you please tell us a little bit about your program at IUP, the different ensembles that you direct, and even also then how you approach programming repertoire for each level of ensemble?
Mm-hmm. We have 4 choirs right now at IUP: treble choir for SSA voices, bass choir for TTB voices, and then 2 mixed ensembles, a chamber group of about 20 singers, SATB voices, and a mixed auditioned choir of approximately 50 students. And the treble and bass choirs are more introductory level ensembles, lots of non-majors, lots of music majors where voice is not their primary instrument, and they'll choose to sing in those ensembles. Obviously, we also have voice majors in those ensembles as well. And there, I think we're looking at that as a great way to build community in terms of the university and visibility within the university. Also, a great way to have an entry point into the choral program, where they're starting to get a sense of what it's going to feel like and look like to sing in a collegiate ensemble, what goals might be important, what skills might be valued for advancement through the program, if you will. And I think the repertoire tends to be not too highbrow, for a lack of a better way to say it. Not that we're doing quality music, I think, but we're not only singing 45-minute works from dead European composers. We're trying to think about repertoire that is in some way relatable to the people on my campus as human beings. So whether that's a text that might have an empowering message for young women, for example, or text that might explore the way as men that we can be sensitive and feeling creatures, maybe important conversations that we can have that way. And then the chamber group is set up in a way that it's not conducted, it's coached. So I think I look at that ensemble as basically a true chamber model. Here's this group of 20 musicians, and collaboratively they need to make artistic decisions and set goals for the ensemble. And so I don't conduct. I sit on the side and ask leading questions. And then they'll say, okay, let's think about this. And I'll say, okay, so do it. And then I'll just sit down and see if they can start themselves without me conducting and starting them. And that's kind of a fun model and a different experience. Then the chorale, university chorale, is kind of the top touring ensemble, I guess you'd call it. It's about 50 students. And they do everything from choral orchestral collaborations. This year we're doing a collaboration on Handel's Messiah with a regional symphony. We're singing Verdi's Requiem actually next semester, as it was performed in World War II at the Terezin concentration camp. There was a movie produced called The Defiant Requiem. It's very powerful. And everything from those kind of iconic works to your typical shorter choral octavos that maybe center around a theme. So last spring we did a concert where the theme was largely centered on mental health and the way that we treat one another, and that when people are unkind or uncaring or less tolerant of one another, that those choices have consequences. And so I found some repertoire that might weave a thought process together for that, and it was a powerful way for us to not only just have a nice musical experience, but to explore our humanity and our compassion for others. And then there's also here at IUP, we have a couple of student-led ensembles, a vocal jazz group, an a cappella group that are student-led, that faculty members sometimes coach them and give them some assistance with. And we're looking at creating and cultivating more opportunities for student conductors to be in leadership positions with ensembles, both at the graduate and undergraduate level. So I love it here. It's an exciting place. We have a lot of opportunities, a lot of different niches, I think, for pretty much any student.
Okay, great. So one interesting thing you had mentioned with that is your one ensemble where you said you coach rather than conduct. That is a rather interesting tactic. So I didn't know if you could talk specifically a little about in that group, in your lesson planning process, how you go about maybe creating some of your questions you ask your students to help them in their decision making for the music making process.
Yeah. One is, for a lack of a better way to describe it, it's creating an atmosphere where there's an illusion of democracy. Obviously, somebody has to be in charge and kind of move people through the process. But this ensemble just rehearsed today, for example, and we were singing a not very difficult arrangement of foom, foom, foom. On December 5 and 20, foom, 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 that little tune. And they sang through the verse. And then I just said, okay, if you were in charge, what would you do? Next, let's sing it one more time. Come up with an answer. And so they sang it again. And just by me asking the question, the level of their run through was significantly better because they were thinking differently. And then people just started raising their hands. And, everything from so one young man rose his hand, and I called on him, and he said, I think there's some dynamics that we're not really paying attention to. It says forte here, it says piano here. It seemed like we just were the same. And rather than just being done there, then I said, okay, let's take his thought and see what we can do with it. So let's start again and honor his suggestion was how I word it. And then they sang through it. And then before I let another student contribute, I went back to that same student and said, how did you feel? Did we accomplish together what you suggested? And he offered some more feedback, and then we tried it again and then moved on to another student. And until multiple students got to have something to offer. And then as it went on, I just asked more pointed questions. How did you feel about measure 21? Anything there that we might think about? And knowing that obviously I heard something there that we should be thinking about. And then, but I didn't tell them. They generated it and then solved it themselves. And after each time, I would just say, well, okay, if we're going to do that, where should we start? Do we need to start at the beginning? Where is there a better place we could start? And forcing them to come up with those ideas, but basically just honoring every person's request.
Great. So one thing with that kind of group too, I know that there has to be a high level of student motivation, and this is something I know you have given presentations on at different professional development seminars for music educators. So with that said, how do you approach motivating students to excel in your program?
I scare them to death. No, just kidding. I think one, it's like there has to be an expectation. So high expectations, and clearly articulated expectations, and then where every day that they see me, that they're getting from me my best, highly prepared, energized, passionate teaching where I'm obviously invested in being there. If they don't see that from me, then how can I expect that from them? And yet at the same time, honesty and vulnerability. I think if students are smart, if they know that somebody's faking it, or if they're being disingenuous, they can see through that. So we have to be true to ourselves, whoever we are as people, when we become conductors. And then when somebody messes up, which we all do, is to not make them feel like a loser. And I can think of some times in my life where I've been in a choir or been observing a rehearsal where when something didn't go well, certain individuals were made to feel less than. And it only takes once or twice for that to happen, and you feel the life being sucked out of the room. And even though inside we might be thinking, oh my God, Susan, can't you just sing that note correctly? You're so loud and it's so wrong. That might really be what's happening. But if I say that out loud to Susan, not only is she going to be dehumanized, everybody else now is going to be afraid that they're the next one. So it's figuring out a way to communicate that clearly sets that goal or expectation, but doesn't make anybody feel like they are a loser, for a lack of a better way to say it. And I've been very terrible at that. There were times when I was teaching high school that I know I was mean, I was not nice, I put people on the spot. And I'd like to think that as I've grown older, I've gotten a little bit more smart, a little more compassionate, a little more understanding about we want to be good, but at what cost? At what cost do we want to be good? And that our experience together is important. Um, I just think people vote with their feet in our business, and if there's no one in my choir, who's that on? That's on me. There's nobody in my choir because nobody wants to work with me. And I want people to want to work with me. I want to work with people. So that means I have to value the experience that they're getting and think about how they feel, how they should feel, how they deserve to feel, and then make my decisions with that in mind.
Wonderful. So, another topic then that I would like to discuss a little bit about is your work with the Pennsylvania Music Educators Association. Currently, you are the president for PMEA District 3, which is an area in central Pennsylvania, I believe, correct?
Yeah, West Central Pennsylvania.
Okay, great. And with that, usually with officer positions within the state, usually you will see that position held by a director more at the junior high or high school level. So the interesting thing with you is being a collegiate director, how has that impacted your teaching, maybe based on observations you've made out at PME functions? How has that contributed to your work as a collegiate director?
Well, I see my work in that regard as being one of service. How can I be of service to teachers and students in our region? What do they need? How might I help them achieve their own goals in their programs? And one thing that being involved in PMEA has really afforded me the opportunity to do is to interact with people and get to know what's going on in their school, walk a mile in their moccasins and see what they do every day, how they function, and then interact with them on a way to find out what they would like, what they wish they could do, what do they wish they had more opportunities to think about, and then how I might be able to, either from my position at the university or through the leadership and in PMEA, help offer those experiences, trainings, thoughts, whatever it might be, to practicing teachers. Kind of like I said earlier, people vote with their feet, and it's the same. It's the same with education and with teachers. The people that stick with it are the people that are being supported and have what they need and feel valued in what they do. And if I can help make people feel valued, if I can help equip people with the things that they need to do their jobs for young people, then that's awesome. That's what I live for. It's awesome.
Great. So, one thing now that we do to end all of our interviews is we go through a list of general questions for each guest. So, with the first one, then, what leaders have inspired you in your career or personal life, and what have you taken away from them?
I think the first leader person that I think of in terms of my personal life would be my father. He's not a musician. He's a businessman, but he was a really hard worker, and he looked at his profession as how he was able to provide for his family, and that kind of idea of sacrifice, what he might want to do, and what he lights went out, what he might want to do, what he what his personal goals, that he maybe puts those on the back burner a little bit in terms of, well, I'm gonna be the best professional that I can and work really hard in order to provide for my family. That work ethic, I think I got that sense from my father, that work ethic and hard work, and that if you do what you've always done, you're gonna get what you always got. If you want a new result, you have to do something different. And I think I learned that from my dad. Musically, I've had so many mentors. I think when I was in middle school, I guess we called it junior high back in the dark ages. I was in junior high, and I was a definitely an unpopular kid. I was quirky. I was a major geek, and didn't necessarily have a whole lot of friends. And I remember being in the choir room, and our teacher, her name was Donna Reet in Spencer, Iowa. And she would have her suit on, her business suit with her pantyhose and her heels, and be teaching. Mrs. Reet would take her high-heeled shoes off, and she would stand on her desk in our middle school, junior high choir room. And I remember we were doing the stupidest repertoire. It wasn't even good repertoire when I think back on it. I mean, we were doing these really terrible arrangements of Phil Collins music. And but the atmosphere in that room felt so empowering and so safe. As a kid that didn't feel safe in the hallways, I didn't want to leave. I wanted to stay in the choir room. And so I kind of joke, I haven't left. You know, I'm a 46-year-old man, and I'm still in that choir room. And that's where I feel safe and where I feel like I can be myself. And that's something that Mrs. Reet gave to me. Later on in life, I had obviously collegiate and university teachers that were very important and empowering. I remember seeing other teachers, other high school teachers, and hearing their choirs when I was teaching in Iowa, and thinking to myself, wow, if Carol Trello at Cedar Rapids Jefferson High School, her women's choir is so awesome. Oh my God, I never even knew an ensemble could sound like that and be 16 years old. It opened my eyes to what kids are capable of, and gave me that sense of something to strive for and aim for. And I think now that I'm older, I obviously still have musical mentors and friends. I have a group of friends. We call each other friend-tours. And there are people from grad school, Andrea Ramsey, the composer, Derek Fox, who's a great conductor, Christy McMullen, works at Ohio State, Elizabeth McFarland, who teaches at Southeast Missouri State. And, so my friend tours, I think that's a great place where we get ideas from each other, get inspiration from each other, get the opportunity to vent to one another. But I think now what keeps me going and keeps me motivated and inspired is my students, and seeing the background that they come from, and that they get the opportunity to do what they love. I have one student who came to me, and she's homeless. Was a homeless student, is a high school student, and her musical education is potentially a ticket out of that life. And that's so empowering and passionate. Fills me with passion about, look what I get to do. I get to help other people fulfill their dreams. I get to help other people get a second chance. And that's what really, I think, keeps me motivated and inspired every day now.
Great to hear. So now, with that said about a lot of the people that have led you in your life, a lot of outstanding leaders sometimes will have characteristic qualities that we'll find across the board regardless of profession life. But when thinking about leaders of a comprehensive music program, what are 3 words you would use to describe an outstanding leader of one of those groups?
Passionate, vulnerable, inspirational. That person brings passion to everything that they do, that you can tell that they love it, that they're excited to be there, that they're excited to share it, that they're willing to be real and to be vulnerable and to share parts of themselves and parts of their feeling, parts of their being that maybe in normal everyday life, we wouldn't necessarily see from somebody on the street corner. And inspirational, somebody that these people are people that cause others to want to work hard, that cause people to want to sing Palestrina when maybe that's not what I really want to sing, or do something that they don't really want to do, but like doing it. that idea of being able to inspire people in that way. So passion, vulnerability, inspiration. Those are my words.
Great to hear. So on to our next question. So with current trends in education, specifically in the secondary level area of public schools, what advice would you give to music teachers to help their students thrive regardless of school scenario or location?
Don't give up. Believe in yourself. Know that even though there might be parents that are giving you a hard time, administrators that seem like they don't care, students that might feel or appear to be apathetic in their approach to the work that you're doing in your classes, be reminded that there is at least one kid in your class that you are making a difference for them. You are the reason they come to school. You might be the reason that they are even living on this earth. And that one kid they deserve our best, and they deserve your best. And that is an enormous responsibility, and something that I think we just need to be reminded of. You might not see who that kid is. They might never talk to you, but no, they are there. They're in your room, and you are making a difference in their life. And that is why we're doing this. It's obviously not for the money. It's obviously not because our politicians are making us feel wonderful about the work that we're doing, right? It's about the student and the difference that you're making in that student's life. And there's always one. Be reminded of that.
Definitely. So to wrap up the interview now, this last question sometimes can throw people for a little bit of a loop. But anyway, there ultimately comes a day in our profession that we have to retire. So when the day comes that you have to retire from the profession, how would you like to be remembered as a leader for your music program, whether at your public school programs, amongst your program at the collegiate level, or even amongst members of the local communities where you taught?
Well, one, I don't know that I'm going to retire. I'm just going to teach forever, and then I'm going to conduct the heavenly choir, hopefully. No, I guess I'd want to be reminded as having been genuine, as having been somebody that people could count on, as somebody that if I said I was going to do something, that it happened, that people could count on that, that maybe in some small way I was a small part of helping people become the best version of themselves that they could be, that in some small way maybe a person had a feeling or an experience that they'll take with them for the rest of their lives that I might have had some small part in helping to create for them.
Great to hear. So, Dr. Beeken, thank you again for joining us today. You have lots of great insight, and we very much appreciate you joining us.
Thanks so much for the invitation. It was a lot of fun.
All right, thank you. This concludes our episode. Many thanks to Dr. Ryan Beeken for taking the time to speak with us about his work as a public school and collegiate level choral director. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to share our show with others on social media and like us on Facebook. This is Doug Conrad saying thank you for listening, and be sure to turn in to the next edition of Director's Circle.